Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Of the hard rock trolls. I'm gonna unite the 6 strings and destroy all music, except for rock!
If Barb collects all the strings, our music will be destroyed forever.
How are we gonna hug our way out of this one?
We need to go undercover.
With fashion!
Let's go save the world!
Cool.
This is Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome to the special edition COVID-19 Rogers TV program dedicated to the topic of community responses to this pandemic. My name is Carol Merton, and before I welcome our guests to the program, I wanted to just say a few words of thanks. So first of all, I want to thank our Medical Officer of Health, the Grey Bruce Public Health Unit staff, our community service providers, and our support agencies, our first responders, hospitals, retirement homes, and long-term care facilities, certainly our farmers, our essential frontline staff, that includes our grocery store attendants, pharmacies, delivery truck drivers, gas station attendants, and so many others that I have not mentioned, for their ongoing efforts and prompt action to keep our community safe. We are all together in this exceptional and ever-changing situation, and we are all working together as a community to reach out to help and support each other. Here at Rogers TV, we will be providing you with current information from our community agencies and our elected officials. However, as you're probably already aware, this information can change on the hour and certainly daily. So we encourage you to stay current with the information by going online to the Public Health Unit website at publichealthgraybruce.on.ca, listen to the radio, read your daily newspaper, and of course, tune into Rogers TV for more updated information. So today I'm delighted to welcome John Farmer to the program. John is going to be talking to us about the men's program and how things are going in this COVID-19 world with service delivery. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be with you from a distance.
We're talking together apart. So I'm wondering if you can just describe a little bit your official title and your role. And then I'm going to turn it over to you and fill me in on what's happening with men's programming.
All right. So my name is John Farmer. I am the supervisor of the men's program, Grey Bruce, and we run a variety of programming for men and in some cases also for women in Grey and Bruce counties, operating programs in Owen Sound and in Hanover. We have 3 primary programs that we run. The first is called the Partner Assault Response Program, also known as PAR. As in par for the course kind of a thing. So partner assault response groups, and those are specifically for people who are referred to us through courts, probation, or self-referred, who have been either charged with or recognized that they've contributed violence or abuse to their relationships. Primarily that is a program for men, but we also run one group a week in Grey Bruce for women as well. We also run a positive parenting program called My Dad's Group. And when COVID-19 shut us down, we were in the final weeks of a positive parenting program for moms as well, called My Mom's Group. Those are group programs built around the idea that if we can bring parents together to talk about the importance of being a dad or being a mom, talk about skills, talk about the needs of their children, and how to prioritize the needs of their kids, even if they're not actively with the other parents of their children, because we know that many parents are co-parents but no longer together, that if we can bring people together to share that information, that kids benefit. And the third program that we run is an individual counseling program for men who have experienced sexual violence in childhood or adolescence. And that's called the Male Survivor Program. So the PAR program and the parenting programs are groups. And obviously, we can't gather in groups right now. The Male Survivor Program is an individual counseling service, so it's one-to-one. And the Male Survivor Program is continuing with services over the phone and in some cases by video chat. Both of the groups or types of groups are on hold for the moment, but just a couple of weeks ago, we started calling back out to participants to just check in to see how they're doing and to make sure that they've got the supports that they need, because we know that this is a stressful time, and particularly when we're talking about keeping women and children safe and empowering men to reduce their own violence and to develop skills that make it possible for them to not be violent and abusive. All of the risk factors for domestic violence are increased right now. Isolation is a risk factor. It's also a tool and tactic of power and control. And people are spending more time with their partners in smaller spaces without the other social and community supports that they usually rely on. We know that financial stress and anxiety also increase the risk of domestic violence. And all of those factors are present when we're talking about a mandatory social distancing period like we're experiencing with COVID-19 across Canada and around the world. Countries are finding that rates of domestic violence and calls to crisis lines, especially for women, are increasing in the current environment. We've heard anecdotally that a few local police services are also seeing increases in calls related to family violence or disruption in the home. And it makes sense, right? Because all of these stresses are higher. And so what we're doing by continuing with the PAR program to call people who are enrolled is to work to support them, to check in so that they know that they're not alone, and so that there are those other supports that they can lean on so that they can keep the people around them safe. With all of our programs, we're still accepting referrals. People can call into the office. I'm in the office today. You can see the office behind me. And, I'm not in the office every day at this point, and our facilitators are working from home, but we are here as a service. And we know that especially at a time like this, men need to commit even more than they already needed to ending violence and to supporting safety in our communities and in our own homes. We're hoping that when this all finishes up, when we can gather again, we'll have the final couple of sessions for our parenting groups, and we'll be back to normal. We don't know when that's going to be, though. So in the meantime, we encourage people to reach out. And it's also really important that if you recognize that a loved one, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, if you recognize that they're experiencing abuse at home, and that could be verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, if they're afraid, if they're being hurt, there are supports in our area to reach out to and for help. The women's crisis lines, operated by Women's House serving Bruce Gray and the Women's Center, continue to be active. The shelters are there. The Gray Bruce Mental Health Crisis Line is still active. Kids Help Phone has added additional staff over the past month or so. There are resources to reach out for help for people who are experiencing violence, but also for the people who are perpetrating violence. We're here because it's not up to the people who are being hurt to make that change. It's up to the person who is doing the hurting to make that change. We are responsible for our own choices and actions. And at a time like this, men need to do that hard work to acknowledge when they need help and to reach out for that help. Even something as simple as recognizing that you're feeling stressed without taking that out on the people around you is important. We sometimes talk about being able to tell your feelings instead of having to show them. And men have not generally been raised to do that. We're taught that it's okay to be happy and it's okay to be angry, but as men, that it's somehow not manly to be afraid or stressed out or anxious or unsure. But this is a global pandemic. Our lives are changing. Our lives have changed over the past 6 weeks, and it's okay to be upset by that. It's not okay to use that as an excuse to reach out and be violent towards other people. We also know that the public health unit has been reporting that rates of substance use have been increasing as people increasingly turn to alcohol or other drugs to cope during this time. And that is also a risk factor for domestic violence.
Yeah.
So it's the perfect storm right now, really.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were discussing it, I mean, for everyone, the stressors are significant, and what you're describing has an impact on all of us as a community in one way or the other. From your experience in counseling people with power and control imbalance and challenges, are you approaching anything differently, knowing that they are isolated in a home environment? You have to be careful if you want to get out. You're restricted in how you can de-stress. Are you finding that you're using different strategies, or are there things that you might want to offer for advice? Not just, to everyone, because stress affects everyone.
Our service has changed from, so the basis of and especially the PAR program, right? The PAR program is our largest program. We run 4 groups across Grey Bruce every week that have anywhere from 12 to 18 people enrolled in them. So that's our largest program, and that's one of the ones where we're calling out now specifically to check in with people. But we've had to shift because our normal service delivery is based on the idea that we're trying to work to shift the underlying beliefs that lead to violence and lead to abuse. And that's deep work. That's work that requires a certain amount of stability. But right now we're living in a time of instability. We're living in a time of crisis. And so we've really had to shift from trying to do that deeper work into just, it's crisis management. It's just talking to people where they're at. It's figuring out what's going on for them, what their own risk factors are, and trying to have conversations that allow them to reflect on where they're at and how they're doing. We're taught to say, oh, I'm fine, even when we're not fine. But it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be able to function in the way that you normally would, to not be able to focus, to feel worried, to feel stressed, to need more time on the couch watching TV, or to just take that time and maybe not learn how to play a new musical instrument or retile the bathroom or whatever like home improvement or personal improvement project you see someone else doing on social media. There's a lot of pressure right now to take this time and use it for kind of personal reflection and self-improvement, but that's just not realistic for a lot of people. It's okay to be still during this time. It's okay to reach out to family and friends. It's okay to not know what's going to happen at the end of it. And if we can give ourselves permission to even just feel those feelings and have those thoughts, that gives us something that we can work with. If you're not feeling okay, the next question is, what can you do about that? Are you worried about something that you can change, or are you worried about something that's beyond your control? Because if you're worrying about something that's beyond your control, there's not actually anything you can do about that. You're just going to continue to worry and be anxious and get upset. And it's helpful at this time to really focus on what we can do, to focus on self-care, to make sure that we're getting enough sleep, that we're eating, that we're connecting with other people, that we're drinking water, to be mindful of how much we're consuming substances. Really, if we talk about that hierarchy of needs, that pyramid, a crisis demands that we look at taking care of those basic needs and functions first, because even safety or security right now isn't guaranteed for everyone.
Yeah.
I would also say generally that if you're not okay, reach out to somebody. Figure out who those people are that you normally call or text with. Reach out to them, say hi, check in with them, let them check in with you. Don't think that you're a burden on other people. Don't think that you are somehow weaker or poorly equipped because you don't have everything figured out. No one has everything figured out. This is, as I'm sure I'm the millionth person to say, these are unprecedented times. We tend to learn by doing. We haven't done this before.
Yeah.
It's also okay, totally okay for this to be a time of rest. If you're feeling like the time that you might have off work right now means that you're more connected to your friends and family, like you are sleeping more and this is okay, yeah, embrace that. It's really a time to just let ourselves do and be what we need to do and be without that extra pressure, because there's lots of extra pressure whether we're putting it on ourselves or not.
And you raise a really important point. I mean, at this point, we're in a situation where none of us really have control. We are needing to do things we've never had to do in our lives and be more self-isolating and just restricting that physical contact between people, which certainly changes everything in our world. It changes how we relate to people and how we respond, for sure. I'm wondering, what you keep mentioning, if you're feeling, that you need to reach out, or if people see something they're concerned about, do you mind identifying what sorts of things would clue me in that I needed to reach out? What sorts of things should I watch for in other people that if I was to encourage them to make a call? What sorts of things should I be aware of?
Well, certainly from a mental health perspective, if you're finding that your ability to meet your basic needs is being diminished by your fear, by your anxiety, by depression, then that's a red flag, right? If you are having a hard time doing the basic things that you need to do to function as a healthy human being, that's a red flag. Also, if we extend that to people experiencing violence, if someone is making you afraid, if someone is threatening you, belittling you, if someone is breaking your belongings, if someone is taking your money, if someone is physically harming you, those are red flags. Often people who are experiencing violence will blame themselves. They'll make excuses for the person who is perpetrating the violence to say, well, they're stressed out, or they were drunk, or this isn't them, this isn't their normal. That's just not, it's just never okay. It's never okay to harm another human being, whether that's, again, emotionally, verbally, mentally, physically. It's just not okay. And if you find yourself making excuses for someone who's making excuses for themselves as well, that's a red flag. There are resources to reach out for and reach out to. I mentioned already Women's House serving Bruce Gray, the Women's Center, both run crisis lines for women. There's the Gray Bruce Mental Health Crisis Line. There's 211. If you don't know who to call 211. Just like you would dial 911 on your phone, just dial in 211. They have a database of all of the resources that are available in Ontario, and you'll talk to another human being who can walk you through that. You can also look up resources at 211 Ontario as the website, and that's important. Now, in terms of what you might recognize in someone else, if they're becoming withdrawn, if you're noticing that they're not participating or communicating the way that they normally would, if they seem afraid, if they're reaching out at strange times, if you notice that for instance, their partner is speaking for them in calls or on situations, all of those are indications that someone is not fully safe. And it's important to be able to talk to and support people, to just reach out to say what you're seeing that's troubling for you. And that approach can be helpful for people who are experiencing violence, but also if you're talking to someone who you think is perpetrating violence. If you're noticing that your friend is texting you a lot of things about how his partner or his girlfriend or his wife is any number of insults, or if they're talking in ways that are objectifying or belittling, if they're talking about being fed up and snapping or using language that says something like, she deserved it. Those are all red flags. And you can reflect that back in a non-judgmental way to say, I noticed that you've been talking about your wife like this. That's not okay. And I'm wondering what's going on. And it's important there to not follow into their line of conversation if they are blaming, if they are justifying their own actions. Because again, it's never okay to be violent and abusive. Please go ahead.
So and what you're doing is describing how, as a community, we can help and support others by having those conversations, and that's important. I mean, we're talking about networking more by telephone, by computer to stay connected, because when people get disconnected, it makes things much more challenging, I would assume.
Yeah, and so we use a framework in our partner assault response groups called a power and control wheel and an equality wheel, and they outline
I'm pulling it up, actually. Keep going. I want to reference it because I did pick it out and I thought it was excellent on the internet. So power and control and equality wheels.
Yeah,
Tell
so
me the difference.
they look like bicycle wheels. Around the outside of the power and control wheel is violence. The hub of it is power and control, and then the spokes of the wheels are different tactics of power and control that people use to get power over other people in relationships. There are 8 sections of that wheel. It includes isolation. It includes coercion and threats, economic abuse, male privilege, using children, and there are a few other sections there that you'll be looking at as well. Emotional abuse,
yeah.
And you can, just for anyone watching, if you're curious, you can look these up online. Just type in power and control wheel. There are lots of examples, and it's important to know what these things are, because we can often think that, well, everyone insults, like everyone has fights and insults their partner. Everyone breaks a mug against the wall every once in a while, and it's just not true. Not everyone does that. It's not appropriate. It's not okay. It's harmful. It breaks down trust and respect and intimacy in a relationship. It inspires fear. It creates pain. And none of that's okay. None of that gets you to a place of having a positive, equal relationship, which is where the equality wheel comes in. There are positive alternatives to each of the behaviors described on the power and control wheel. Those are found on the equality wheel. In terms of if people are watching and they want to learn more about how to recognize domestic violence or gendered violence this way, there is a great training organization called Neighbours, Friends and Family. It's based out of Ontario, down in London. And if you just type in Neighbours, Friends and Family, you'll find all sorts of resources on their website about how to recognize when someone's being abusive, how to speak with someone who you think might be an abuser, and they've got a number of resources to also support you if you are experiencing violence. Because, and I'll emphasize this right now for anyone watching who is experiencing violence in a relationship now or who has in the past, it's not your fault. You didn't deserve that. You're not alone, and there are resources to support you, and you deserve to be supported as you heal. And firstly, we all deserve to be safe. So I think those are some important things to just lay as a groundwork for these conversations.
Yeah, and the directness of what you're saying is excellent, because people need to know you deserve to be safe. You do not deserve to be treated with violence. And in this particular situation that we're all in COVID-19, being more isolated or insular in your home is not always a safe place for people. And so in your conversations, you're touching base with your different group members. My first question is, are you finding you have to connect with people more? Are your conversations longer? I guess that's more than one question. I'll let you go. I could go on a roll, but maybe you could answer those first, John.
Certainly. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to have full hour-long conversations with all of the dozens of people who are in our programs right now. We're just doing check-in calls. For some people, they don't want to connect with us. Other people are really grateful to have someone to talk to and to connect with. We're really seeing a range in what people need. Some people are really struggling right now and need a lot of support and connection to other supports, which are available, right? Like like call 211. You can also look up a resource called Where to Find Help in Grey Bruce, which is produced by the Canadian Mental Health Association, and it's a 4-page handout. I've got a copy with me right now, and it's all sorts of resources. Though it's changing the lighting on me, but it's a densely packed resource with everything from addiction support to housing support to safety support. And people need different things. For some folks, they're continuing to work, or they aren't worried about income right now. For other people, they're really worried about their income, and they're in dire straits. So the support that people need is different because everyone's experience of this is different. I saw a wonderful image going around on social media last week that said, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat in it. Some people are in a light rain right now, and an umbrella is all they need. Other people are in a hurricane, and it's important to remember that people are having different experiences during this time, and that because of that, they need different supports. There are programs that are still offering food in Grey Bruce. The food banks are receiving lots of support, and this is also a time when people who have never had to reach out for these kinds of supports need to in some cases. And I think it's important that we recognize that that's okay, and that we encourage people to reach out for the help that they need. Yeah.
Anyone who's watching the program today and they feel at risk, you would certainly recommend that they reach out. Just because we have to stay in place and stay housed in place does not mean you have to stay at risk in place, correct?
Absolutely, right? Like the goal is to be safe at home. And if you're not safe at home, it's okay to leave. I think it's also important for us to check our own maybe judgment during a time like this. It's easy for people to look at the window at someone who's out for a walk with their kids and say, why isn't she at home? Right? Like, she's doing this wrong. She's not respecting what we're being told to do. But you're assuming, if you're passing that judgment, that she can be safe at home, that those children can be safe at home. There was an article that came out through CBC with an interview from a woman who's the executive director of a women's shelter up in Yukon, who was really emphasizing this point, because we can't assume that everyone's okay right now. Yeah. Most of us are not okay, and that looks different for different people, but it's important that we extend some compassion to our neighbors and our friends and our family, to steal that term again, because our immediate judgments around that are really harmful. It creates a situation where it's more difficult for people to reach out for help.
And that just adds to the stresses. I mean, there's enough going on without having to feel that people are judging you or making assumptions about you that may not be accurate. And I think adding stresses is just not helpful. We only have a minute left in our program. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. John, do you have anything you want to say in the last minute?
I think it's really important for people, a couple of things. If you know a man who has a propensity to be violent and abusive, reach out to him as well. It's important that we as men take responsibility for ending men's violence and to preventing violence against women and children. We know that disproportionately men are the people who perpetrate violence in our society, whether that's violence against men, against women, against kids. The horrific events in Nova Scotia are a very clear reminder of that. And it's important that we as men take responsibility for being safe and keeping the people around us safe.
That's an excellent message. And on that note, I want to say thank you for being on the program, and thank you to our viewing audience. Please stay tuned for more information about COVID-19 special edition resources. Take care of each other and stay safe.